She replaced her cousin at the airport pickup and picked up a Millionaire CEO by mistake. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The steady hum of engines filled the terminal of John F. Kennedy International Airport. Announcements echoed through the air, mixing with the clatter of luggage wheels and the rustle of travelers in long lines. Under the fluorescent lights, Mira Tran stood nervously by the arrival gate, clutching a white cardboard sign that read, Daniel Wells, Investor Group. Her cousin Lynn was supposed to do this job, but Lynn had caught the flu that morning. It is just a pickup, nothing complicated, Lynn had texted. He is a business guest from Singapore. Please help me, Mira. So here she was, in her second-hand coat and faded sneakers, standing among professional chauffeurs holding perfect signs. Mira kept checking her reflection in the glass wall. Her ponytail was slightly crooked, her cheeks flushed from the cold outside. She whispered to herself, You can do this, Mira. Just smile, say hello, and get him to the hotel. All. A new flight's passengers streamed out, and among them, she saw him a tall man in his 30s, wearing a white dress shirt under a charcoal gray coat, a carry-on suitcase gliding behind him. His dark hair was neatly styled, and there was an air of quiet confidence about him. He looked exactly like the kind of person her cousin's company would work with. Mira lifted her sign higher, their eyes met. The man hesitated for a moment, then walked toward her. Mr. Wells? She asked, trying to sound professional. Welcome to New York. I am here to pick you up. He blinked, surprised, then gave a polite nod. Thank you, Miss Tran, she said quickly. Mira Tran. The car is waiting outside. He studied her face for a second, as if something amused him, then smiled faintly. Lead the way. The automatic doors opened, and a rush of cold air swept through as they stepped outside. Snowflakes drifted through the evening light, catching in Mira's hair. She guided him toward a modest sedan parked near the curb. It was not a luxury vehicle, but it was clean, and she had borrowed it from a friend who worked for a car service. Inside, the heater groaned as warm air sputtered to life. Mira adjusted the mirror nervously and pulled into traffic. The silence between them was thick for a moment before she finally spoke. I hope your flight was comfortable. It was, he said. His voice was calm, low, the kind that seemed to belong to someone used to being obeyed. Do you often work in airport logistics? Oh no, Mira laughed softly. I am just filling in today. My cousin usually handles VIP clients. I actually teach art to kids, and paint when I can afford the supplies. That made him glance sideways at her. Art? That is not something you hear every day from a driver. I am not really a driver, she admitted, gripping the wheel tighter. Just someone who cannot say no to family. He smiled again, more openly this time. Family can be persuasive. As they merged onto the expressway, the city skyline rose ahead, glittering through the snow like a sea of distant stars. Mira felt a strange calm settle in. Maybe she could pull this off after all. The man beside her seemed kind, polite, and thankfully not the talkative type. Still, something about him made her curious. His watch gleamed under the dashboard light, clearly expensive. His phone buzzed with constant notifications, but he ignored them all. There was quiet strength in the way he sat, composed yet distant, as if the world outside did not touch him. When they arrived at the hotel entrance, Mira hurried out to help with his luggage. Thank you for your patience, Mr. Wells, she said with a shy smile. Enjoy your stay, and have a great evening. He reached for his suitcase, then paused. Would you like to join me for a coffee before you go? It is freezing, and I would hate for you to drive back alone on an empty stomach. Mira hesitated, surprised by the offer. I should not, but maybe just one cup. Inside the warm cafe corner of the hotel lobby, she sipped her coffee while he watched her with quiet amusement. Neither of them knew that this small, accidental meeting would change both of their lives forever. The next morning, sunlight leaked through the thin curtains of Mira's small apartment in Queens. The hum of early traffic drifted up from the street below, mixed with the distant sound of a barking dog and a radio playing somewhere in the building. Mira sat on the edge of her bed, still wearing yesterday's jeans, staring at the sketchbook open on her lap. She had drawn him, Daniel Wells, the man she picked up by mistake. His sharp profile and calm eyes looked back at her from the page, every pencil stroke capturing a mix of mystery and kindness. She laughed softly to herself. "You really are ridiculous, Mira. He was just being polite." The clock on the wall read 7:45. She jumped up, realizing she was late again. Her shift at the coffee shop started at 8:15, and she still had to catch the 7 train. Mira rushed through her tiny apartment, grabbing her apron and stuffing the sketchbook into her bag. The heater rattled weakly, barely keeping the cold away. Outside, the air was crisp. She pulled her coat tighter and hurried down the cracked sidewalk. Her rent was due in 3 days. Her art class had been canceled because there were not enough students, and her savings could not cover both paint supplies and groceries this week. Still, she whispered to herself, "You are fine. Just keep moving." At the cafe, the bell above the door jingled as she pushed in. The smell of espresso and burnt toast filled the air. Her manager, Carla, glanced up from the counter. "Morning, Mira. You are late again." "I know, I am sorry," Mira said, tying her apron. The train stopped between stations. Carla sighed but handed her a tray of orders. "Table 4 needs refills, and the machine is acting up again, so use the backup grinder." "Okay." "Yes, ma'am." For the next few hours, Mira worked non-stop pouring coffee, wiping tables, smiling at customers who barely noticed her. The world blurred into the steady rhythm of clinking cups and ringing registers. When she finally took a break, she sat by the small window in the back room and opened her sketchbook again. She added soft lines to Daniel's drawing, shading the collar of his coat. She wondered what kind of life he lived. Probably a man with a corner office, expensive shoes, and people who brought him coffee instead of the other way around. Yet last night, he had offered her warmth without arrogance. That thought lingered. Her coworker Jen peeked in. "Hey, daydreamer, you okay?" Mira smiled faintly. "Yeah, just thinking about something funny." "Must be a good kind of funny," Jen teased. "You look like someone who just saw a miracle." Mira closed the sketchbook quickly. "Nothing like that." "Oh." By late afternoon, her feet ached, and her tips barely filled the jar. She left the cafe and walked the long way home to save the subway fare. The winter air bit at her cheeks, but she found small beauty in the sunset glowing across the skyline. The city looked softer, then less cruel, almost kind. When she reached her building, the landlord was waiting near the door, arms crossed. "Miss Tran, rent was due last Friday." "I know, Mr. Gordon," she said quickly. "I can pay by Wednesday. I just need a couple more days." "You said that last month, too," he sighed. "Wednesday then, no later." She nodded, clutching her bag tighter. Inside the apartment, she hung her coat and dropped her earnings on the table. $32 and some change. She exhaled slowly. "You will make it work," she whispered. Her phone buzzed. A message from her cousin Lynn. "How did it go with the airport pickup? Was he nice?" Mira typed back. "It was fine. Just a little mix-up. He was kind, though." She hesitated, then added, "I think I picked up the wrong guy." Lynn replied with a string of surprised emojis, then, "You what?" Mira laughed out loud, the first genuine laugh of her day. "Long story," she texted. Later that night, she sat by the small window with her sketchbook again, drawing the glow of the city lights. For the first time in weeks, she felt a spark of peace. She did not know that somewhere across Manhattan, Daniel Wells was sitting in a high-rise office, staring at the same city, remembering the girl who picked him up by mistake, and wondering why he could not stop thinking about her. 3 days later, the snow had stopped, but the chill in the air still clung to the city like a thin, invisible fog. Mira walked through the outdoor market near her apartment, carrying a canvas bag filled with cheap art supplies she had managed to buy with her tips. Her fingers were cold, but her heart felt a little warmer knowing she had enough to keep painting for another week. She found a quiet spot on a bench near the edge of the park, unzipped her sketchbook, and began drawing the people passing by. A mother holding her child, a man feeding pigeons, an old woman selling scarves. Each stroke of her pencil steadied her breathing. For a few minutes, the noise of the city faded away. Then, a familiar voice drifted from behind her. "You really do draw everywhere, do you not?" Mira turned sharply. Daniel Wells stood a few feet away, wearing a black overcoat and holding a cup of coffee. He looked just as composed as she remembered from the airport, though his smile carried a trace of mischief. "Mr. Wells?" she said, blinking in disbelief. "What are you doing here?" "I could ask the same thing," he replied, glancing at the sketchbook in her lap. "But I suppose this is your world, not mine." He extended the second cup toward her. "Coffee. I remembered you take it with a little sugar, no cream." Mira hesitated before accepting it. The paper cup was warm against her palms. "You remembered?" "I do not forget small kindnesses," he said simply. She laughed nervously. "You call picking up the wrong person a kindness?" "Well, you saved me from standing in the cold trying to find a taxi," he said. "So yes, I would call that a kindness." They both sat on the bench. The silence between them was not awkward this time. Mira found herself watching the way the winter light reflected in his dark eyes. He seemed tired but peaceful, like someone who had spent too long pretending to be fine. "So," she said carefully, "did your meeting go well? The one you came here for?" Daniel nodded. "It went fine. But I've been thinking about your art since that night. You said you teach children?" "Part-time," she said. "It does not pay much, but it keeps me happy." "Nowhere. You must be very dedicated." He leaned slightly toward her, his tone softer now. "Would you mind showing me some of your work?" Mira hesitated, then opened her sketchbook. Pages of pencil drawings, fluttered faces, cityscapes, small moments of life. Daniel studied them carefully. "You see things differently," he said at last. "You capture people as if you already understand them." Her cheeks grew warm. "Thank you. I just draw what I feel." "Oh," he closed the sketchbook gently and handed it back. "You should never stop." Before she could answer, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and frowned slightly, the warmth in his expression dimming. "I am sorry, work calls." He stood, buttoning his coat. "But before I go, do you come here often?" "Almost every afternoon," she said honestly. "It is quiet here." "Then maybe I will see you again," he said. "And next time, the coffee is on me." He walked away, his figure disappearing into the crowd. Mira watched him until he was gone, her heart strangely full. She whispered under her breath, "You will see me again?" "Sure, like that will ever happen." That evening, as the streetlights blinked on, Mira sat by her small window again. She added the new page to her sketchbook, a drawing of Daniel sitting on that park bench, holding a cup of coffee, looking not like a millionaire but like a man searching for something real. Across town, Daniel stood by the window of his high-rise office. City lights reflected in the glass. On his desk lay a folded napkin from the cafe downstairs, covered in quick notes for a project he was funding, a charity initiative for local artists. Next to it was a small sketch he had made absent-mindedly while on the phone. A woman sitting on a bench, holding a pencil, surrounded by pigeons. For the first time in years, he smiled without thinking about deadlines or investors. Somewhere out there, a girl with paint on her hands had reminded him what sincerity looked like, and without realizing it, both of them had just planted the seed that would change everything. The next afternoon, the gray clouds over Manhattan broke into thin ribbons of light. Mira returned to the same park bench, sketchbook in hand, her breath forming small clouds in the air. She told herself she was only there because it was her favorite spot to draw, but a small, persistent hope whispered otherwise. When she looked up from her page, Daniel was already there. He carried 2 cups of coffee and smiled as if this meeting had been planned all along. "I thought you might be here," he said, handing her a cup. "You seem to prefer the quiet corners of the city." Mira took the coffee, feeling her pulse quicken. "And you seem to have a talent for finding them." He sat beside her. The noise of the park faded as their conversation grew. They talked about art, travel, and the strange loneliness that comes from chasing success. Mira told him how she had once dreamed of opening her own art studio for children who could not afford lessons. Daniel listened, his gaze steady, as if every word mattered. When she laughed about her lack of business sense, he said, "Sometimes vision matters more than numbers. Numbers can always follow." Their laughter mingled with the winter breeze. Mira began to relax around him. He was not the untouchable man she had imagined. He teased gently, asked thoughtful questions, and listened as if her stories were more valuable than any meeting he might have missed. As the sun dipped lower, they walked along the park path. Daniel noticed her fingers trembling from the cold and handed her his leather gloves. "You can return them next time," he said. "Next time?" she asked softly. He smiled. "You do not think this is goodbye, do you?" Her heart skipped once, quick and unsure. Over the next 2 weeks, their paths crossed again and again, sometimes by chance, sometimes because one of them quietly made it happen. They met at a coffee shop, at a small art fair downtown, and once at a bookstore where Daniel showed her his favorite travel essays. He never spoke much about his work, only that he helped run a company that supported creative ventures. Mira did not pry. She liked the version of him who simply carried coffee cups and laughed at bad jokes. One evening, he stopped by her cafe just as she finished her shift. "I was nearby," he said casually. "Would you mind showing me some of your paintings?" Mira hesitated. Her apartment was small, cluttered, nothing like the world he must have come from. But his tone was kind, not demanding. So she led him there. Inside, he stood quietly, looking at the canvases stacked against the wall. "You live in color," he said at last. "Even when everything around you is gray." Mira blushed. "I just paint what I wish life looked like." Daniel turned toward her. "That is exactly why it feels real." They stood in silence for a moment, the hum of the heater the only sound between them. Then he looked at one unfinished canvas, an outline of a man sitting on a bench. "Is that me?" he asked softly. She smiled shyly. "Maybe." His expression softened. "Then I hope you finish it." That night, long after he left, Mira sat in front of the half-finished painting, her brush trembling slightly in her hand. For the first time in years, she did not feel alone while painting. She did not know it yet, but that small warmth blooming in her chest was something deeper than admiration. It was the beginning of love. The following weekend, the city softened under a gentle snowfall. Mira waited outside the art supply shop with her sketchbook tucked under her arm. Daniel had promised to meet her there. When he arrived, his scarf dusted with snow, he greeted her with that familiar, calm smile that always seemed to steady her nerves. "I figured you might need a partner to carry all those brushes," he said. She laughed. "You would regret volunteering once you see how heavy paint cans are." Inside the store, Mira moved between the aisles like a child in a candy shop. Her eyes shone at every shade of blue and gold. Daniel followed, occasionally handing her things she would not have bought for herself: better paper, stronger brushes, higher quality pigments. "You do not have to do this," she said quietly. "These are expensive. Consider it an investment," he said, his tone light but sincere. "One artist at a time." Mira hesitated, unsure how to respond. She wanted to believe he was simply being kind. Yet she sensed something more, a desire to see her succeed without asking for anything in return. After shopping, they walked along the East River. Snowflakes floated through the air, melting on her hair. Daniel carried her bag of supplies, while she clutched a cup of hot chocolate. "You know," she said, "I used to come here with my father when I was a kid. He told me that rivers carry stories. Every current is someone's dream trying to find its way." Daniel smiled softly. "And did your dreams ever reach the ocean?" She looked out at the dark water. "Not yet, but I still believe they will." For a while, they stood in silence, the wind tugging gently at their coats. Daniel's expression grew thoughtful. "If I told you that you could make those dreams happen sooner, would you believe me?" Mira laughed lightly. "That sounds like something a movie character would say." "I am serious," he said. "You have something rare, Mira. You make people see hope. The world needs more of that." His words sank deep into her heart. She looked up at him, unsure what to say. He was gazing at her, as though the chaos of the city had disappeared, and only she remained. Later that evening, they visited a small gallery downtown, where Daniel had arranged for one of her paintings to be displayed anonymously in a local artist showcase. Mira's eyes widened when she saw it hanging under the soft light. "Wait, how did this get here?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I might have made a few calls," he said with a quiet smile. "Do not worry, your name is on it. You deserve to be seen." Her throat tightened. "Daniel, I do not know what to say." "Say that you will keep painting," he replied. The visitors moved slowly around them, admiring the artwork. Mira stood beside her painting a depiction of the park bench where they had first talked, her heart swelling with gratitude. When they stepped outside, snow covered the streets like powdered glass. Daniel took off his scarf and wrapped it gently around her neck. "You will catch a cold," she said softly. "Then we will both blame the weather," he replied. Mira smiled, her breath visible in the frosty air. "You are impossible." "Maybe," he said, his eyes warm, "but sometimes impossible things are worth chasing." That night, when she returned home, she placed the scarf on her chair and stared at it for a long time. Her world was still small, her rent still unpaid, her future uncertain, but now, for the first time, it all felt possible. And she could not stop wondering who Daniel Wells really was. A week later, the invitation arrived. It was printed on thick ivory paper, sealed with gold foil, and delivered to Mira's cafe by courier. Her name was written in elegant script. Miss Mira Tran, guest of honor. She stared at it, confused. The letter explained that her artwork had been selected for a charity gala hosted by the Wells Foundation. Her painting of the park bench had caught the attention of a major donor. Mira's hands trembled as she read it again. "This cannot be right," she whispered. "I am not anyone's guest of honor." Her coworker Jen leaned over the counter, grinning. "Looks like someone is moving up in the world." That evening, Mira stood in front of her small closet, trying to decide what to wear. She only owned one decent dress, a simple navy blue piece she had bought for her cousin's graduation. She ironed it twice, brushed her hair, and put on a pair of second-hand heels that pinched her toes. Before leaving, she looked at Daniel's scarf hanging on her chair and smiled. The hotel ballroom glowed with chandeliers and the soft hum of violins. Waiters in black uniforms carried trays of champagne. Mira felt small among the crowd of executives and journalists. She clutched her purse tightly, her heart pounding. A hostess greeted her. "Miss Tran, right this way, please." "Oh." Mira followed her through the glittering room until they reached the main stage. Her painting hung there, illuminated under a golden spotlight. A placard below read, "The Bench," by Mira Tran. She froze, her breath caught as realization struck. The Wells Foundation, Daniel Wells. Her eyes swept the room, and there he was across the floor, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, surrounded by photographers. He was shaking hands with sponsors, his smile practiced but tired. Mira's pulse thundered in her ears. Every detail clicked into place, the way he avoided talking about his job, the subtle confidence, the way people looked at him when they passed by. He was not just some investor, he was the head of the foundation itself. When Daniel finally saw her, his expression softened. He excused himself and walked toward her through the crowd. "Mira," he said gently, "you came. You are the Wells Foundation," she whispered, barely able to speak. "All this time you knew exactly who I was, but you never told me who you are." He hesitated. "I wanted you to see me as a person, not a name." Her voice trembled. "You should have trusted me enough to choose that for myself." Around them, the music played on, elegant and distant. Guests glanced curiously at the young woman standing in front of the millionaire host. Daniel took a small step closer. "I never meant to hurt you. Everything I said, everything I did, it was real." Mira shook her head, fighting back tears. "You turned my mistake into a game." He reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "Please, just listen." "I did listen," she said softly. "I listened to every word, and now I do not know which parts were true." Before he could speak again, she turned and walked toward the exit, her heels echoing against the marble floor. The cold air outside stung her face, but she did not stop. For the first time since she met him, she felt foolish for believing that kindness could exist without strings. Inside the ballroom, Daniel stood motionless, the noise of applause and conversation fading into a dull hum. On the stage behind him, Mira's painting glowed under the lights, a quiet reminder of the truth he had hidden. The city rain came the next morning, washing the streets in silver. Mira sat by her window, staring at the half-finished painting of Daniel she had started weeks ago. The colors now felt wrong, too bright, too trusting. She dipped her brush into gray paint and began to cover the canvas, each stroke heavy and slow. Her phone buzzed endlessly that day. Articles were spreading about the gala, showing photographs of Daniel Wells with the caption, "The mysterious CEO who found a hidden artist." Mira's name appeared beneath the headlines, her picture taken without her knowledge. Some comments praised her story, but others were cruel, calling her a gold digger, a lucky charity case. She closed her phone and buried her face in her hands. The noise of the city, once inspiring, now sounded like mockery. She felt exposed, small, and deeply foolish. By afternoon, a knock came at her door. It was her landlord, Mr. Gordon. "Miss Tran," he said, his tone clipped. "The building manager saw you on the news. You are quite the celebrity now, but fame does not pay rent." "Oh," Mira took a slow breath. "I will find a way, Mr. Gordon. Please just give me a few more days." "You have until Friday," he replied and left without another word. When the door closed, Mira leaned against it, her body shaking. "You wanted kindness to mean something," she whispered to herself. "And you ended up being someone's lesson." That evening, she received a message from Daniel. "Daniel, please let me explain. Meet me at the cafe, just once." She read it twice, then deleted it. There was nothing left to explain. Across the city, Daniel sat in his office, his tie loosened, exhaustion etched into his face. His assistant had warned him that investors were questioning his judgment after the scandal. A CEO getting involved with a cafe waitress. "It is bad optics," one board member had said. He had defended her, but every word only seemed to dig the hole deeper. The truth was simple. He had never cared about optics until now. That night, he drove to her apartment, parking across the street. Through the window, he saw the faint glow of a lamp, Mira's shadow moving slowly as she cleaned her brushes. He wanted to go to her, to knock and explain that everything he had done came from something real. But when the light went off, he knew the moment was gone. The next morning, Mira packed her things. The gallery that had displayed her painting called to inform her that several people wanted to buy her work, but she refused politely. "I am taking a break," she said. Art should not feel like pity. She left her apartment key on the table and stepped into the gray dawn with only her sketchbook and a small suitcase. She did not know where she was going, only that she had to start somewhere new, far from whispers and headlines. As the train rumbled out of the station, she looked down at her hands. The faint smell of paint lingered, reminding her of who she really was, before everything glittered and fell apart. She flipped open her sketchbook and began to draw the skyline fading through the fog. The first line was shaky, but the next was steady. For now, she would move forward alone. 2 months passed. Spring arrived quietly, softening the edges of winter. Mira now lived in a small town 2 hours north of New York City, working at a local art center that offered free classes for children. The pay was modest, but the days were peaceful. The laughter of the kids, the smell of paint, and the sound of brushes tapping on paper gave her something she had lost purpose. One Saturday morning, the director of the center called her into the main hall. "Mira," she said, smiling, "someone wants to sponsor an exhibition for our students. They insisted on including a section for your work as well." Mira frowned. "That is kind, but I am not ready to show my art again." The director placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Just think about it. The sponsor said it is meant to honor artists who inspire others through kindness. It sounds like it was made for you." A few weeks later, the day of the exhibition arrived. The small-town gallery buzzed with excitement. Colorful drawings from the children lined the walls, their names written in bright letters. Mira stayed behind the scenes, helping the kids set up. When the music began, the lights dimmed, and the announcer's voice echoed through the hall. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our special guest." This exhibition, titled The Art of Mira Tran, was made possible by a foundation dedicated to celebrating authenticity and compassion. Mira froze. The name on the banner above the stage gleamed under the lights. Wells Foundation. Her heart skipped a beat. Before she could move, the crowd parted. Daniel Wells walked slowly toward the front. No cameras, no entourage, just a simple suit and tired but hopeful eyes. Mira stood still, every emotion she had buried flooding back. Daniel took a microphone, his voice steady but low. There was once an artist who believed that small acts of kindness could change a person's life. She gave her time, her heart, and her honesty to everyone she met. "I broke her trust because I was afraid of being judged by the world. Tonight, I want to make things right." He stepped aside, revealing a painting behind him, her sketchbook, carefully framed, open to the page where she had drawn the park bench. Beneath it, a plaque read, "The mistake that changed everything." Mira's eyes filled with tears. The audience began to applaud, but all she could hear was the sound of her heartbeat. Daniel continued, his gaze never leaving hers. "I cannot undo the lies I let stand, but I can show the world the truth that your art, your courage, and your integrity made me a better man. If forgiveness is something you still believe in, I would like to earn it." The hall fell silent. Mira walked slowly toward the stage. Her voice shook as she spoke. "You cannot buy forgiveness, Daniel, but you can prove that you have changed." He nodded. "Then let me start by doing what I should have done from the beginning, stand beside you, not above you." The children from the art center began clapping softly. Mira looked around at their hopeful faces, then back at him. For the first time in months, she felt warmth instead of anger. She whispered, "Maybe some mistakes are meant to happen." Daniel smiled faintly. "The best ones always are." That night, under the glow of the gallery lights, forgiveness did not need to be spoken again. It was painted in every color on the walls around them. A year later, the city was alive again with the sound of summer. The Wells Foundation had partnered with the Art Center to open a permanent gallery for local artists, and Mira was now its creative director. Children's paintings filled the front walls, while her own pieces hung quietly in the back, soft reminders of how far she had come. That evening, the foundation was hosting its first anniversary celebration. Lanterns glowed over the courtyard, and music drifted through the air. Guests mingled with artists, teachers, and families. Daniel stood near the entrance, greeting people with a calm, genuine smile. His presence no longer carried the weight of titles or wealth. He had learned to listen more than he spoke. When Mira arrived, the crowd seemed to fade. She wore a simple white dress, her hair loose, her sketchbook tucked under one arm. Daniel stepped forward to meet her. "You look radiant," he said softly. "And you look at peace?" she replied. "I guess time really does change people." He smiled. "Time helped, but so did you." They walked together into the gallery. A new piece hung in the center, a large painting that Mira had finished only a week ago. It showed two figures on a park bench, surrounded by swirling colors of spring, their faces turned toward the same horizon. The small inscription below read, "To the day that went wrong, so everything else could go right." As the music quieted, Daniel turned to her and took a deep breath. "There is one last thing I have to do," he said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small wrapped in a piece of linen. When he opened it, Mira gasped. Inside was the same $10 bill she had once lent a stranger at a train station, carefully preserved and framed in glass. "I kept this," he said, "to remind me that kindness is the only real currency that never loses its value. It started everything. So tonight, I want to give it back to you, not as repayment, but as a promise." He lowered himself onto one knee, his voice steady but tender. "Mira Tran, will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that love is not about status or wealth, but about action and honesty?" The courtyard fell silent. Mira's eyes glistened with tears, but her smile was bright and certain. She placed her hand over his and whispered, "Yes, Daniel. 1,000 times yes." Applause rose around them, soft at first, then filling the night like music. The children from the art center released paper lanterns into the sky, each carrying small drawings of hearts and stars. Daniel slipped the ring onto her finger, and they stood together under the golden light. Later, as the guests departed, Mira and Daniel lingered in the empty gallery. She traced her fingers along the frame of her painting and said, "It still feels unreal, all of it." Daniel wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "Maybe," he said, "but every real thing starts with a mistake that we choose to make right." Outside, the lanterns floated higher, their glow reflected in the glass windows. Mira looked up at them and smiled. The world had once told her that she was too small to matter. But standing there, surrounded by color, light, and the man who had learned to love without hiding, she finally understood. Some mistakes are not meant to be corrected. They are meant to lead us home.